By the time anyone found the footprints, the storm had already buried half the truth. The rest had vanished into the forest with the monster everyone feared. The first sign that something had gone terribly wrong was the scarf. It lay tangled in a thorn bush at the edge of the mountain road. Stiff with ice and dusted by fresh snow, its bright red fabric standing out against the endless white like a wound that refused to close. Days later, when people would speak of the girl who disappeared during the blizzard, some would remember the scarf. Others would remember the scars. Others would remember the strange tracks that appeared beside her own. But no one would understand what really happened that night, with me hayutuning klitui, or why the most feared creature in the valley became the only reason she survived. Before the storm swallowed the world, 18-year-old Elara had been sitting in the back of a wooden wagon beside her uncle, her hands tucked beneath a wool blanket as freezing wind cut through the mountain pass. She had spent most of her life learning how quickly people could leave. Her father had died in a mine collapse when she was 7. Her mother followed 2 winters later after an illness no healer could cure. Since then, she had been passed from relative to relative like an obligation. Nobody wanted. Nobody was cruel enough to say it aloud. Yet, nobody truly wanted her either. She learned to smile when she felt unwanted. Learned to apologize for taking up space. Learned to expect disappointment before hope. That afternoon, her uncle had promised they would reach the next village before nightfall. Yet, the mountain had other plans. Thick clouds rolled over the peaks. Wind screamed through the trees. Snow began falling harder than anyone expected. At first, it was only inconvenient. Then it became dangerous. Then terrifying. The road vanished beneath white drifts. The horses panicked. Visibility disappeared. Elara could barely see the lantern hanging from the wagon. "We should turn back," she shouted over the wind. Her uncle didn't answer immediately. His face had become pale, nervous, distracted, as if something else troubled him beyond the storm itself. Then she noticed the way he kept glancing toward the forest, toward the black line of trees stretching across the mountainside, toward a place locals whispered about, but avoided discussing openly. The territory of the Wolf King. Stories about the werewolf had existed for generations. Children grew up hearing warnings. Stay away from the northern forest. Don't wander after sunset. Never follow strange footprints in snow. Some claimed the beast hunted travelers. Others swore it protected the woods from hunters and poachers. Nobody knew the truth, because few who encountered it ever spoke clearly afterward. Most were too frightened to describe what they had seen. Another violent gust struck the wagon. One horse reared. The wagon tilted dangerously. Then everything happened at once. Wood cracked. A wheel slid into a hidden ditch. The wagon lurched sideways. Elara felt herself thrown into the storm. Snow exploded around her. Pain shot through her shoulder as she landed. By the time she staggered upright, coughing and disoriented, visibility had become almost non-existent. "Uncle!" she screamed. The wind swallowed her voice. She stumbled forward. "Uncle!" Nothing. Then, through the snow, she saw him. For one brief moment, their eyes met. Relief surged through her. But something strange happened. He hesitated. Not because he couldn't reach her. Not because he didn't hear her. He simply looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Guilt. Then fear. Then decision. He climbed back onto the wagon, snapped the reins, and disappeared into the storm. Ilara stood frozen. Not from cold, from disbelief. Her uncle had left her. The realization struck harder than the wind. She wanted to believe there was another explanation. Some misunderstanding, some reason. Yet, deep down she knew the truth. He had chosen himself, chosen survival, chosen to leave her behind. Alone. The mountain became silent inside her. A numbness settled where heartbreak should have been. Then the cold returned. Ruthless and immediate. Snow soaked through her boots. Her fingers lost feeling. Darkness approached. She started walking because standing, still, meant death. She didn't know where she was going. Every direction looked identical. White sky, white ground, black trees, endless wind, time blurred. Minutes felt like hours. Her legs weakened. Her breathing became painful. She fell once, twice, 3 times. Each effort to stand required more strength than the last. Then, tracks. Massive footprints pressed into the snow ahead. Not human. Not wolf. Something in between, larger than either. Her heart stopped. Every childhood story returned at once. The Wolf King. Yet, curiosity overcame fear. The tracks continued into the forest. Away from the open mountainside, where the storms raged strongest. What she didn't know was that another pair of eyes had already been watching her for nearly an hour. Hidden among the trees stood a towering figure covered in dark silver fur. His shoulders were broader than any man's. His claws could split bark from ancient pines. His golden eyes reflected faint moonlight behind storm clouds. He had watched the wagon accident, watched the man abandon the girl, watched her struggle through snow deep enough to kill most travelers. He should have left. Humans brought trouble. Humans brought hunters. Humans brought pain, yet something about her stopped him. Perhaps it was the way she continued walking despite exhaustion. Perhaps it was the loneliness he recognized, because it mirrored his own. Or perhaps fate had already chosen this moment, long before either of them understood why. Ilara followed the tracks until her strength finally failed. She collapsed beside a fallen tree. The cold no longer felt cold. Instead it felt distant, comfortable, dangerous. Her eyelids grew heavy. Snow collected on her hair. "I guess," she whispered weakly, "this is it." The forest answered with silence. She thought of her parents, wondered whether death felt lonely, wondered whether anyone would search for her, wondered if anyone would care. Then she heard it. A crunch, a cover another. Heavy footsteps approaching through the snow. Her eyes opened slightly. A massive silhouette emerged between the trees. Taller than any man. Covered in fur, glowing eyes fixed upon her. Terror should have come. Instead, she felt strangely calm. Maybe because she was too exhausted to run. Maybe because death already seemed inevitable. The creature stopped several feet away. Snow swirled around him. His gaze studied her carefully. Not like prey, not like a hunter, more like a question. Elara tried speaking. "Are you?" Her voice failed. The werewolf crouched slowly, close enough now that she could see scars crossing his fur. Old wounds, deep wounds, the kind that never truly heal. His eyes held something unexpected. Sadness. Then something stranger happened. He removed the thick fur cloak hanging from his shoulders and placed it over her body. Warmth immediately surrounded her. Elara stared in disbelief. The werewolf stepped back, waiting, as if giving her a choice, as if respecting her fear. "Why?" she whispered. He couldn't answer. At least not with words she understood, yet his expression changed slightly. A flicker of pain crossed his face. Then he turned away. For a moment, she thought he was leaving. Instead, he crouched again and carefully lifted her into his arms. The movement was surprisingly gentle. She weighed almost nothing to him. Every story she had ever heard insisted werewolves were monsters, killers, beasts. Yet this creature held her more carefully than most humans ever had. As he carried her deeper into the forest, Elara drifted in and out of consciousness. Was it for Sayer? Strange images flashed through her mind. Firelight, snow-covered trees, the rhythmic sound of a powerful heartbeat beneath fur. Once she woke briefly and found herself staring at the side of his face. Moonlight illuminated sharp features hidden beneath his wild appearance. There was intelligence there, awareness, humanity. Before sleep claimed her again, she noticed something else. He kept looking over his shoulder, as though he feared something following them, as though even a creature like him had enemies. Hours later, Elara awoke beside a fire. At first, she thought she was dreaming. Warmth surrounded her. Thick blankets covered her body. The storm's howl had become distant. She sat up abruptly and found herself inside a cavern illuminated by orange flames. Ancient symbols covered stone walls. Animal pelts lined the floor. It looked less like a monster's den and more like a hidden home forgotten by time. Then she saw him. The werewolf sat across the fire watching her, not sleeping, not moving, simply ensuring she remained alive. Their eyes neither spoke. The silence stretched. Finally, Elara swallowed hard. "You saved me." The werewolf lowered his gaze, almost embarrassed by the observation. "Why?" she asked again. Yeah. He remained silent. Yet his expression revealed conflict, like someone carrying secrets too heavy to share. Outside, wind battered the mountain. Inside, the fire crackled softly. For the first time since her parents died, Elara felt something she hadn't expected. Safety. Yet neither of them realized that rescuing her from the snow had only begun a story Nairdul imagined, had only begun a story far more dangerous than either imagined. Ihauras took tours, because somewhere beyond the forest, men had already discovered the abandoned wagon. They had already found the giant tracks beside the girl's footprints, and by sunrise, a hunt would begin. Not for Elara, but for the creature who carried her to safety. And when that hunt reached the forest, Both their lives would change forever. The fire burned low through the night, painting shifting shadows across the stone walls, while Elara struggled to decide which frightened her more. The stories she had heard all her life, or the evidence sitting directly in front of her that those stories might have been wrong. The werewolf remained near the entrance of the cavern, silent and watchful. He never moved closer than necessary, never reached toward her, never did anything that resembled a threat, yet that somehow made him even more mysterious. Monsters were supposed to be simple, easy. They attacked, they hunted, they destroyed. Kindness was harder to explain. Kindness demanded questions, and questions were dangerous because they forced people to reconsider what they believed. Deg de Diof, several times. She caught him one, glancing toward her, before quickly looking away, as if he wasn't accustomed to company, as if her presence unsettled him almost as much as his presence unsettled her. Eventually, exhaustion dragged her back into sleep. When she awoke again, pale sunlight filtered through cracks in the cave ceiling. For a few moments she forgot where she was. Then she saw the massive figure crouched near the entrance, staring out toward the snowy forest, and reality returned all at once. The werewolf had not left. In fact, judging by the untouched position of his body, it appeared he had remained there the entire night, guarding, watching, waiting. Why? The question refused to leave her mind. Slowly, she sat up. Her shoulder still hurt from the fall, but the pain had dulled. Nearby, she discovered fresh water collected in a stone bowl, and several berries arranged carefully on a flat rock. Someone had placed them there while she slept, someone who clearly expected her to wake hungry. She looked toward him. "You did this?" The creature glanced back briefly, then gave the smallest nod. The gesture was so unexpectedly human that it caught her off guard. "Thank you," she said quietly. For a moment something softened in his eyes. Then it vanished. Outside, snow still blanketed the forest, but the storm itself had passed. The silence felt enormous. Elara moved cautiously toward the cave entrance. The werewolf immediately stood, not aggressively, more like concern, as though he feared she might fall. "I'm just looking," she assured him. To her surprise, he stepped aside and allowed her to pass. The world beyond the cave was breathtaking. Towering pine trees stretched across the mountainside. Fresh snow glittered beneath morning sunlight. Ice crystals sparkled like scattered diamonds. It was beautiful enough to feel unreal. Yet, as she admired the landscape, she noticed something strange. Tracks. Dozens of them. Not animal tracks. Human. Fresh human tracks, leading through the forest below. Her stomach tightened. The werewolf noticed them too. Instantly, his posture changed. Every muscle in his body became tense, alert, dangerous. For the first time since meeting him, Elara saw traces of the predator hidden beneath his calm exterior. He moved toward the tracks and examined them carefully. Then a low growl escaped his throat. Not anger, worry, fear. That frightened her more than the growl itself. What could make a creature like him afraid? Suddenly, a distant sound echoed through the forest. A horn. Then another. Hunters. The werewolf's head snapped toward the noise. His golden eyes narrowed. Elara felt her pulse quicken. They're searching for you, she realized aloud. The creature looked at her. Neither of them needed words. The answer was obvious. Someone had followed the tracks. Someone knew he had taken her, and they had assumed the worst. Her uncle, the abandoned wagon, the villagers. If they believed the werewolf had kidnapped her, they would come armed, prepared to kill. Another horn sounded closer this time. The werewolf stepped backward toward the cave, motioning for her to follow. Yet, Elara hesitated. A part of her knew she should return to civilization, should leave the forest while she still could. But another part remembered being abandoned, remembered freezing in the snow, remembered waking alive because this creature chose compassion instead of violence. I won't tell them where you are, she said quietly. The werewolf stared at her. Something passed through his expression then. Surprise, perhaps even gratitude. Neither expected what happened next. Voices echoed from the trees below, human voices, nearer than before. The werewolf immediately shielding her with his body, protecting her from people. The irony nearly took her breath away. The hunters emerged moments later. 6 men carrying crossbows and spears. Their leader was a broad-shouldered trapper named Garrick, a man known throughout nearby villages. The instant he spotted Elara, relief crossed his face. "Thank the gods!" he shouted. "You're alive." Elara stepped forward. "I'm fine." Then Garrick saw the werewolf behind her. His relief transformed into hatred. "Get away from him." Several hunters raised weapons. The creature didn't attack, didn't even growl. He simply stood still. Yet the hunters reacted as though they faced a nightmare. "He saved me," Elara said quickly. No," Garrick replied. "He's tricked you." "That's not true. It's a monster. He carried me here." "Monster. He protected me." "Monster." And Elara suddenly understood something terrifying. Facts didn't matter. Kindness didn't matter. People saw what they expected to see. Nothing more. Garrick slowly lifted his crossbow. "Step aside, girl." The werewolf remained motionless, yet his eyes never left Elara. Not the weapon, not the hunters. Her. As if his greatest concern wasn't dying. It was whether she would be harmed. "Don't," she warned. Garrick fired. Everything happened instantly. The bolt shot forward. The werewolf moved, not toward the hunters, toward Elara. He shoved her aside. The bolt buried itself deep in his shoulder. A roar exploded through the forest. Birds scattered from trees. Snow fell from branches. The hunters staggered backward, blood-stained silver fur. Elara stared in horror. He had taken the shot meant for her. The werewolf could have attacked, could have torn the hunters apart. Instead, he retreated, clutching his wound. Pain twisted across his face. "Stop!" Elara screamed. But chaos had already begun. More hunters emerged, weapons raised. The werewolf glanced at Elara one final time, then disappeared into the forest. The hunters pursued immediately. Elara ran after them. Branches whipped her face. Snow slowed every step. Ahead she could hear distant shouts. Crashing trees. The hunt was moving deeper into the mountains. Then, suddenly, silence returned. Complete silence. One By one, the hunters emerged from the trees, confused, frustrated. The werewolf had vanished. Garrick cursed under his breath. "We'll find him." Elara looked toward the endless forest. Something felt wrong. She knew he was injured, alone, hunted, and despite everything she had been taught, the thought hurt more than she expected. Back in the village, her return was celebrated. People hugged her, praised the hunters, condemned the beast, yet none of it felt right. Every version of the story ignored the truth. They spoke as though she had escaped captivity, as though she had survived despite the werewolf, not because of him. Days passed, yet she couldn't stop thinking about his wounded shoulder, his lonely eyes, the way he placed his cloak over her freezing body, the way he stood between her and danger. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Late one evening, while searching through old records in the village chapel, Elara found references to the Wolf King, not stories. Historical records, accounts written over a century earlier. The creature wasn't born a monster. His name had once been Kailan, a guardian, a warrior. According to the documents, he had protected the valley generations ago, until betrayal transformed him into something neither human nor beast. Worse still, the records thest ever, es ever, eftil. The records revealed a hidden truth. Every few decades, hunters attempted to kill him. Every attempt ended in bloodshed, not because he attacked first, because they did. Elara read until dawn. Piece by piece, the image of the monsters shattered. By sunrise, she knew one thing with certainty. Something else was. Something buried in the valley's history. Something connected to the reason he remained trapped between two worlds. And if she was right, the hunters searching for him might accidentally unleash a threat far worse than the creature they feared. What Elara didn't know was that deep within the mountains, Kailan lay alone in an abandoned ruin. The crossbow wound had become infected. His strength was fading, and for the first time in decades, he found himself thinking not about survival, but about the girl he carried through the snow. The girl who looked at him, the girl who looked at him and saw something other than a monster. The girl whose absence suddenly made the endless forest feel unbearably empty, and neither of them realized that their paths were about to cross again, far sooner than fate intended, because the next hunt would not end with a wound. It would end with a choice, a sacrifice, and a secret powerful enough to change both their lives forever.